I'm Joshua, and I'm an INTP, and recently I made a video on an INTP and their emotional experience, particularly my experience with emotions. However, in that video, in retrospect, I don't feel as if I went into enough detail. Particularly, I hate it when I do something and I feel as if it's incomplete. It didn't have a symmetry or harmony to it because I spoke mainly about my own feelings, which was rather self-indulgent because it's not something I particularly do, so I did not know how to balance the information out to include this piece of information to where my emotional experiences are greatly shaped by others' emotions. So I did not talk about my relationship to others' emotions and experiencing the emotions of another person. And so INTPs, I think, we're notoriously known for being ill-equipped at handling emotional displays and expressions. And this, I would like to say this too, to sort of create a better understanding and framework for an INTP, is that we have emotional lives. I think I made this very clear in my previous video, but the thing about our emotional lives is that they're private, and we're very reticent to share that expression with the world because it is so confusing and crippling and paralyzing to us that we are basically unfunctional and just inert and incapable of actually dealing with them. I can share an experience. Please do not condemn me for this or judge me for this, but at a point in my life I went through a severe amount of trauma, and I could not reconcile this trauma with just logical reasoning and inference, and therefore the rational structure, the mechanisms I had in my brain did not suffice in being able to handle exactly what I was going through. And I remember being very much at a still state, trying to run through the ideas and the mind maps and models in my head and processing this information and just this event, this trauma, and knowing what to do with it, and coming up short and just suddenly going from a very still state to complete wailing and crying. And it was so rather alarming for myself to go through it because I couldn't stop it. My emotions, I said before, because this happened in high school, were not very much developed and weren't any greater than that of a 9-year-old, and so I sat on the floor and I cried and I pounded the floor. It was horrific, and it's a very difficult memory for me to pull and dredge up or even to share. And my sister witnessed me go through this, and she was absolutely at a standstill and didn't know what to do because no one in my family up to that point had even seen me show an outward display of emotions. My family knew sort of that I was emotional, but any time I would want to have a lack of emotional control, because a lot of it stems from this seeming mechanism in my brain that literally shuts down my emotions, and it's almost as if the rational centers in my mind are just trying to do this so that I can be able to move in the environment without much friction, and it just stands down on my emotion. It just puts them down, puts them down, puts them down so that I can make rational choices and decisions. But so my family's known this for quite some time, but when I had this episode, they were just at a complete loss. They did not know what to do with me. I didn't know what to do with myself because I had never quite broken down like this. And that's not the only time I've had emotional episodes, and I call them episodes because they are very infrequent, but when they come, they're punctuated events. I'll know them. And that's primarily what I talked about in the aforementioned video. But in this video, I think what I would like to talk about, I suppose the reason I mentioned that in relation to other people's emotions is that I'm not good at processing and handling my own emotional space. So I do not really know what to do with another person's emotions. At least I don't instinctually know what to do, and it wasn't until I was in romantic relationships that I even developed a pattern of behavior towards someone else's outward emotional expressions, because it was non-existent before then. Um, my sister is a very emotional person, and I completely, when I was younger, I would completely shun her whenever she expressed herself like that, because I had no room for it, and I didn't know what to do with it, and I was quite honestly as um, paralyzed and alienated by her expressions as I was by my own expressions. Um, okay, and moving from that, I think I need to explain the mechanism really and why that's a thing, because emotions for an INTP are not things to be shared. Extroverted feeling is something that's repressed. It was even something that was evident when I was very young, because I would go, even when I'd laugh, or when I am elated or excited, or even think something's funny, it took me, I think, post the ages of 16 to actually allow other people to see that, because for a long time I would laugh as a child and I would do this, I would cover my face and I would hide, and my grandmother and my sister, they would sit there and try and pull my hand, and I bring it back to my face because I didn't want them to see. I didn't want them to just instinctually, emotions were not things to be shared for me. And even I like to be rather under control of my state as a person. And I don't know why it's necessarily like this in the TIFE axis, but it works in this dynamic to where it's the external display is something that is shunned, or is just something that is judged by TI as inferior, insofar as it does not help in determining what's going on, or even assist the situation. That's one thing I used to sort of rebuff and reproof my sister on all the time. She would throw these tantrums, and I would ask her, well, did that really solve or fix anything? Did you discover any more about why you had that problem, or what the truth was? Or I would reproach her in this manner, just saying the reason for it, does it match the sort of result, and is just the result worth it? Because it was just she was an introverted feeler, so when she had her emotional storms, they were once they went from the internalized landscape that they exist in, she expressed it with extroverted thinking. It was just, it wasn't fun to deal. It wasn't fun to deal with, and but so it was kind of chaotic, and I would always reproof her and just asking the rational questions. Well, what did that gain you? What did that do? Where did that come from? Why does it exist? And I would pepper her with these things, and it didn't make it better. So you can imagine our childhood growing up together wasn't the greatest, but it's to say this, that just the way that I am orientated, it seems the way that INTPs are orientated, we don't handle our own emotional responses well, because we don't like the outward display and show of emotions, it seems, naturally. We don't really want to share these things with a community to begin with. We rather want deference and respect from the community, but not sort of the gregarious and philaic and agape sort of harmonious love and romantic notions that so many people have about what it means to be loved communally. It's not that we want. Our sort of a love for an INTP starts from a place and a standpoint of deference and respect, and it's tremendously different from where most people start. I think that's something that's true for most NTs. But moving from that, that's just where our emotional landscape begins. And so that's why the stereotype exists to some extent, and why you may see what you see from an INTP. But don't let that there convince you that your emotions don't affect them, because this is something else about the emotional landscape for the INTP and what we do with other people's feelings. So other people's feelings, they're like little time bombs. We don't like them. I don't like them because they are so far-reaching. I can explain it like this, because we have repressed extroverted feelings. So when we walk into a room, I don't know if all INTPs experience this, but I know I experience this. Even though I repress extroverted feeling, when I walk into the room, I can kind of tell the vibe in the air, and it's rather difficult for me to voice that because I'm Mr. Irrational. So there is a vibe in the air, and I think that the scientific explanation is because we have mirror neurons and we're social creatures. So those mirror neurons, they don't turn off for the INTP, and that the social aspects and what we're able to actually pick up and ascertain from the environment based on people's postures, their the tonality in their voice, all of those things, they don't go anywhere. They're actually very, at least for me, they're very much real and things that I realize. I'm not able to connect, it seems like I'm not able to connect those things to social rules. It's not so much that I don't realize someone else's emotional makeup or their wherewithal or even what's going on in the room, because I know completely what's going on in the room, but it seems that what I don't know and what I don't readily pick up are dominance hierarchies and the social structures that extant on top of those things. Those are the things I don't realize and I don't notice, because those are the things that are internally even consistent within me, because I make up my own internal structures and I rule and determine myself, not the outward environment. So that's not something I'm privy to see in the outward environment, the sort of rules that govern it. But the inferior FE, it doesn't let me see the sort of social rules and the moral makeup, but what it does let me see is just the actual emotional and moral makeup of the individuals themselves, and the sort of impression that arises from those individuals coming together in a community. It's to say this, that other people's emotions, I know they're there, and they affect me because I can, to some extent, feel them. And I don't like feeling them. That's the thing I'll say. I don't like feeling them because they're not safe for me to feel. It's not as if I don't care about my family, and it's not as if I don't care about my friends. I do, but they just don't realize that there is a sort of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde relationship between I and my emotions. They're not safe for me. They're not even, I said in the previous video that they're not friendly, but I think not friendly was just the wrong descriptive tool. Not safe as in I do not make good decisions and they don't lead me to good places. And I mean good in the value judgment sense of the word. That it seems that the things that allow me to have the right sort of ethical framework and the egalitarian nature that I sort of inherently have from being an extroverted feeler is I'm only able to maintain it through a rational lens of the world. It's not good for me to sort of experience emotions in the same way that people do, or at least process and act on them in the same way that other people do, because they're things that are complex and nuanced, and I cannot pull out and pick out the complexity and the nuance. They're not very well differentiated, so I can't really see where they're leading me or where they're taking me to. I can see the logical conclusions of a thought, and I can even see the logical conclusions of an action, but an impetus, sort of a sudden springing forth desire, because that's what emotions seem to do for me. They seem to be the motivational seat of my being, and when they are, when they sort of motivate me, I guess I should say what I mean by not well differentiated first, so that someone can get a good idea of why I don't particularly like to experience it, and why I don't particularly like to experience another person's emotion, because they make me experience their emotions whether they realize they're doing it or not. Um, and a scenario. So, I don't want to really give a personal scenario, but I'll just say this, that it's strange as an INTP, because I can be, I can dislike, admire, be aroused, and displeased with the same person all at one time. And I can only know those things are there if I let the emotions manifest themselves and sort of create the structure in my mind that they do create. And that, there's not why I would feel that way necessarily about a person at given one instance or one scenario, and it's never one instance in one scenario, but I'm not privy to pick up what exactly led to those feelings in the first place. And then what that complex and that mess of feelings, what they would sort of lead me to act like, given just, I think I go from A plus B equals C. It's not good. It's just, when I don't have sort of the same moral framework, I have a fair framework, and my mind works on fairness. What's fair given the situation and what makes sense. It's not about what's necessarily morally correct. And so if I act on my emotions, I do not make morally correct decisions most of the time. I make logically correct decisions. And logic is not at all concerned with, even though I'm acting on emotion, when I'm acting logically based on my emotions, I'm not acting in any humane manner whatsoever most of the time. And that's the thing that sort of is driven out of me by being emotionally driven. And because I do care about people in a very humanistic way, I make sure that I don't go there, because I can't have any service to people or really be communal and egalitarian with people if I'm driven by my emotions. It just won't. It's not good. I don't know any maybe there's an INTP out there that can be like that. I just really can't. It's not healthy for myself nor for the other people around me. And per se, just that's why I don't want to experience other people's emotions, because my emotions, they're reactive. They're not proactive. They're extroverted in nature, so they're based off of the external environment and the people within it. They're not something that it's not something that rises up in me spontaneously. So it's something that when people present it to me, they don't realize what they're doing is being sort of a lacquer or some sort of litmus test for me and how I should feel. And that's and I think mature, or people who have extroverted feeling as their dominant function, they can feel what another person's feeling, or at least they can feel what's out in the environment and assume it without it actually taking over themselves. My emotions are possessive in some respect, because they're not very mature. They're not very differentiated. I suppose what's differentiated and mature is just that I actually give them a more positive outlet in trying to be more philanthropic and humanitarian in my actions and my mannerisms with people, but should not act emotionally. Okay, and so that's I think what I would like to say in this video. I was going to talk about INTPs in relationships, but I think that this covers sort of what I wanted to say really in that video in terms of just no, actually I retract that. I'll say this also too about an INTP and their relations to other people's emotions. Other people's emotions, now it depends on if the INTP cares or not, but you have to understand, at least me, you have to understand, I am sort of impotent in front of them. I cannot combat them or deal with them, and I suppose it's maybe because I come from an attitude of combatants towards them that I don't have a good handle in dealing with them. But it's to say this, that I'm but a child in the face of them. I think that it would be as it's like a small child watching his family be attacked. I don't like when I see people hurt or distraught if I care about them. Now that's a big if, like it's care. So I'm not saying that, but if I care about somebody or something, I don't like to see them in that state. But I feel completely inept, and when I am vulnerable, I feel completely inept. I know how limited I am as an individual in the face of two things: Mother Nature and emotions. Like, very really. And so I don't really like dealing with them in myself or in other people. Now, what has come from just my relationship with my sister, who's an INFP, and other NFs in my life, and my NF friends, is just learning to have a space sort of for them. And what I mean is, as in a space, is just tolerating them and confronting things in myself. It's with the INTP, we're self-referential. We have to start with ourselves. I think anybody who leads with an introverted function has to start with themselves, and so what we have to do in being able to manage sort of the emotional landscape for another person. I don't manage other people's emotions because I don't manage my own emotions, but my NF friends, they do go through trials and tribulations and trauma and all kinds of suffering and pain that I wasn't aware of until they divulged that information to me. And what it seems like I'm able to do is be sort of the rational analyst even in that environment, and being able to help them realize what it means to be human in some respects from a scientific standpoint. And though it's all binary reason and logic in some ways, because I'm taking that reason and I'm taking that logic and making it applicable to them, and really making an effort and sharing the information with them because I care about them, that they realize, and it's conciliation, it's a conciliator, very much so for them, and that seems to be the role and the landscape I can exist in as an INTP in the emotional lives and space of other people. But please don't come up to me crying or anything like that. I've learned now that it happens, and I've also learned too that even if you're stone cold faceless, you pat steadily as you're doing it, though you don't really know what to do. That seems to be the mechanism that I've learned, the behavior that I've learned, that people seem to tolerate. I can show that I care. It's much like, it's not, I suppose so, Too Weird to Normal mentioned this, but we're accused of being emos and robots at the same time. But it's not as if our sort of intellectual high tower nature, well, it's just, I guess, suppose ivory tower nature, and our rational bent doesn't have a heart in some respects. So sometimes I do wonder if I have a heart. Well, I should say I wonder if I have a soul. I don't wonder if I have a heart. I wonder if I have a soul at times, but uh, just poking a little fun at myself. But we do come with a heart, insofar as we're the Tin Man, or if anybody's seen Bicentennial Man, the movie where Robert Williams is an android and he's steadily made human through his experiences in the world. That's sort of the INTP's archetypal journey, being made human in the general sense in what comes to the mind of most romantic types of individuals. That's, I think, to some extent, that's our journey. Um, but it's just, I know what emotions are and I experience them, but I do not have the mechanism to work with them. I can deal with them, I can handle them, I can understand them. I should not experience them, so I honestly make that off limits for most people. And I don't like to particularly display them, because I think I made this pretty clear. Once I'm displaying them, I'm not in a good space. There's a good deal of negative emotion, and even complete jovial elation. It does not stay safe. It's just, I don't make good decisions, and so far as, if you just don't take me to Vegas, man. It's just like the hyper exploratory nature, when it gets extremely excited, it does not make rational choices, and I don't make rational choices all the time. The only time I don't make rational choices is when my emotions act, or when I act on them. I should not ever act on them. I'm not an INFP. I can't do that. I'm not an ENFP or an INFJ. I can't do that. It's just not. I can't do it and it be safe for myself and others. It's just not safe. Um, so that's just, I think, the totality of just the emotional landscape for an INTP. In my previous video, what it is for me, and then in this video, what it is for others and me. And I would say to others, insofar as when you're interacting with an INTP, it's just actually have some empathy and some kindness for them, because I don't think people realize you affect us. Whether you know it or not, you affect us. We're sort of in this ivory tower to begin with, and we have quite a bit of trouble with communication and relating to people. But it's like we're trapped in this box because you affect us so tremendously. But we can't voice it, and we can't say it, and we can't seem to share it in the same language that you can share it with one another. And that's enormously frustrating, because people make assumptions and they just don't like what they don't understand. And it's like, I can understand you probably better than you think I can, but it's just like, you stop at me and you don't even you can't understand me. It's like, that's just a very frustrating relationship, and it's particularly because of the fact of our orientation in relation to our emotions. And it's just to have a heart in some respects, you know. We don't, I say this in some instances and making it seem as if we naturally care, but it's like we care, but we don't care. And the thing about not caring is just that we want to be autonomous. It's not that we want to be androids. It's like, I'm the master of my soul. I'm the commander of my ship. I direct my own way, my own path. I come to realizations about reality. I determine what's out there. I want to investigate it, and I want to know the truth. That's what I'm after. And that's what gives me my autonomous bent. Just, quite honestly, a thirst for knowledge, truth, structure, and directing myself. But that doesn't mean that I'm not affected by people. I'm very much affected by people. And it's sort of dealing with this. That's the source of my nihilism, the fact that I'm affected by people. If I wasn't affected by people, I wouldn't think that there would be no point to life at times, because it's just the things that seem to catch my attention are how completely hopeless it can be at times. It seems at times, of people making the right choices for the future because they're just ignorant in so many areas, or people don't seem to have the necessary distance to have the right type of empathy for strangers, and just religious wars and all these different things that people have come up with and drummed up with in history, and just the total bloody and violent history of humanity. That's what makes me nihilistic. That it's not my own self. Like, there's nothing. Cuddling up with logic or empiricism isn't as drab and depressing as so many people present it to be. At least not for myself as being rational. But when I do take a look at other people and analyze them, which I've learned not to do, but when I sort of experience the world, and I think INFPs know this thing too. Extroverted intuition, it just sees. I think this is extroverted intuition, but in the SI axes, but it sees. It just sees things, and it can't unsee what it's already seen. It can't not know what's been made known to it. There's just this beauty, there's just this awe, wonder, and inspiring quality of life, this beautiful sort of manifestation that presents itself in all majesty to most NP types, but then at the same time there is this very horrific, ugly, grotesque picture that is there and you have to deal with. And I suppose the way I deal with it as a rational is just understanding the world and just accepting things for what they are, because primarily what thinking cares about is what is. It doesn't ask moral questions, and so that doesn't really bother me. But the minute I do let my sort of emotions come into the fray, it bothers me. And that's why, and that's the seat and the root for my nihilism. I don't know about anybody else, but it's just, I shouldn't be emotional, and other people, they need to just understand that, we have them, and we experience yours to a degree which you just don't understand. It's like, so just spare us, or at least if you're going to be emotional with us, ease us into it. Use emotional statements as well as using rational statements, sort of let us get assimilated and accustomed to it, then give us the space to be sort of the rational surgeon and doctors, excuse me, and that we like to be with things, and we can kind of do this dynamic and dance to where you don't feel like I'm a complete jerk and I don't feel completely alienated. So that's what I'd like to say in this video, and hopefully this will just fit the scrutiny in my mind and sum up the totality of this position and these arguments. So